Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington. This is the program recorded on Friday, May 6th. In this fast-moving situation, you got to know what when this intelligence picture was put together. Let me just ask you to get up to date. There's such a avalanche of events in the past week. We cannot do justice to all of them in this program alone. If you go to tarpley.net, you will find, I believe, 3 clips from Iranian Press TV from Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday of last week. Press TV. There's a clip from Russia Today, RT, of last Tuesday. There are extensive excerpts from an appearance I made on Tuesday also on the Alex Jones radio show, and there is a 1-hour program in the nature of a strategic overview trying to cover all the bases with the Jeff Rentz radio program. All of that displayed on tarpley.net. Since we're in this kind of a situation, let me also warn you, there are some websites up there that have my name, sometimes my picture, image and likeness, as they say, that have nothing to do with me. There are in particular a couple of sites on Facebook. You can tell them because they seem to be interested in buying and selling gold and silver, which it's a fine thing, but this is not what I do. I have nothing to do with these sites, and I'm amazed that they're able to put them up. There's also a Twitter feed, Webster Tarpley, with no G. That's not me. And they've managed to get a picture, which I guess I have not. I am Webster G. Tarpley, all one word. That other one, Webster Tarpley, I don't know what the motives are there, but it's not me. So please bear this in mind. Right? I have nothing active on Facebook at the present time. I have a kind of a site which is there, but it's pretty much under construction and not usable at this point. And other than that, what you really want to do is take it all through tarpley.net. If you go through tarpley.net, you get right to the real Twitter feed, and you get to the real stuff that's going on. Now, we are now in a period of extremely elevated risk of false flag terror operations, primarily targeting Pakistan, secondarily targeting Libya, but really any target is now possible. And by target, I mean the country to which these, or country or group to which these actions are going to be attributed. They will be false flag. They will be manufactured by usually the U.S. and British intelligence community, but then they will be designed with the moles and so forth, and patsies above all, to try to target certain groups. I would say at this point, if you have not read 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA, you've got to read the full methodological discussion in there, and you've got to do that fast. You better do that this weekend if there's any way you can get your hand on that book. If you have not thoroughly read and studied 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA, you do not know the method that is being used by these intelligence agencies. And you're therefore very vulnerable to being duped or disoriented or demoralized by the things that are likely to be happening over the coming weeks, especially the theory of the moles, the patsies, and the technicians. I think that's the most developed theory of state-sponsored false flag terrorism that you can find anywhere. For those who can get the Italian edition of a book called Zero by Giulietto Chiesa, at that time a member of the European Parliament, there's also in there a very good summary of the drills. It includes, I think, we have basically 25 plus drills on the morning of September 11th, 2001. 25 plus drills either just concluded, ongoing that day, that morning, or in advanced stages of planning. And I'll go through some brief summary of the theory, but without the 9/11 synthetic, you just can't do it. So get a copy of that. The 4th edition, I believe, is one, but for the theory, you can get any edition. So any of those from Amazon or Progressive Press. The question that we now have to face is, was this past weekend the Sarajevo of something cataclysmic? And there's a substantial chance that it was. And I say this not to make people paralyzed with fear, but to encourage them, to goad them if necessary, into powerful, potent, and effective political action. Political action, which means organizing mass forces to get things done, and to educate people, to provide them with leadership, with program, and with organization. Those three things that they need. I've gotten a couple of inquiries how to organize. Well, the answer how to organize is not immediately clear, but there are certain things that you can do. If it just comes down to look at that Twitter feed that I put out, see what you can glean from that. You can retweet those things, or you can comment on them. You can summarize them in other terms. You can react to them. Anything that stirs the pot in terms of showing on Twitter and in the face of world public opinion that there is an opposition to these horrendous events. I stress this idea of showing that there's an opposition because in the past week we have had some shocking cases of the so-called left liberals turning into raving, bloodthirsty warmongers for Obama. The people who were against the Iraq war, it turns out in so many cases, had no objection to war. They just hated Bush and Cheney, and they are imperialists. And this was the whole Iraq debate was to a large degree a debate between two imperialist factions. I guess the bombers and the stranglers were the ones that we had at one point in the past, but those two approaches about how to run imperialism. Well, I am not in the business of advising imperialism. This is not the left wing of imperialism or the loyal critical opposition. We're not. This is anti-imperialism, and therefore take a look at these things that I've written, and above all the media events of the last week. Now, we've had this U.S. murder spree over the weekend from Saturday night until Sunday night. I thought the main danger was obviously a false flag terror event orchestrated by the U.S., British, French, and other intelligence agencies and blamed on Libya. Now I think that goes into second place. That's still there, a little bit on the back burner, but absolutely worthy of attention and maybe even coming sooner because of more decent interval, you might say. But the other one, of course, is now the pseudo-Al-Qaeda, right? We have the alleged death of the pseudo-Bin Laden, and all of that in quotes. And now, of course, the CIA and the U.S. Cyber Command obligingly allows an so-called Al-Qaeda website to concede, yes, it's true, you killed him, but now the revenge of Al-Qaeda is at hand. What an idiotic soap opera. Sophomoric, as Alex Jones said this week. Absolutely cretinous. And if to believe this stuff from the greatest liars of the age in the wake of what the neocons did, right? Remember Shulsky and the Office of Special Plans? You have to be very gullible. So the point, if you don't want to be gullible, you better educate yourself and get oriented. So the murder spree, I once read an account of the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Actually, it was an eyewitness report from a guy who had been there. And he said that they have this board, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon, they have a board up there which shows a number of objective indications about how hot and how dangerous the world situation is. And one of the boxes is, has there been an assassination of a chief of state in the last week? Has there been an attempted assassination of a chief of state in the last week? Has there been an assassination of some other high-level public figure? And if those answers are yes, it means that the alert status, at least in the intelligence departments, goes up. So that's where we are now. Was it Sarajevo? Was it? Well, time will tell. But in the meantime, let's organize, right? Get active or get radioactive. Back in a minute. Back to World Crisis Radio. Now we've got to keep moving here to catch up with these events. So we're ready for what may happened. First of all, this entire bin Laden story, completely manufactured. I don't have time or interest to engage in literary criticism of the quality of fiction writing and creative writing of this sort. The basic idea is that Obama has been, the basic fact is that bin Laden has been dead since the year 2001, 2002, probably died of kidney failure. Since then, we've had a series of doubles. These doubles do a number of things. They issue audio and videotapes. Those are usually dictated in terms of contents and timing by the needs of the U.S. British intelligence communities. For example, one in October 2004, issued by bin Laden, was very helpful in getting Bush reelected when that was not at all a certainty. The one that I always found funniest was the October 2007 one, which showed a bin Laden with a very dark beard. It looked like he dyed his beard. In the coloring, generally, the eyebrows that he had, he looked a little bit like Groucho Marx. So that was obviously a different double. In other words, it's a parade of people who don't look the same. We've had thin ones, fat ones. We've had the Osama the Gaunt, or Osama the Stout, the Angry, the Brovial, whatever it is. However, there's also a function going on that's a little bit deeper. There are dupes, fanatics, psychotics, patsies all around the world, a whole patsy network and patsy milieu who are susceptible to being told what to do by this pseudo bin Laden sitting there. So they've got to keep him operating. So he gets messages from Chinese Turkestan or from Chechnya or other parts of the world. What should we do? And, of course, he responds according to the lines dictated by U.S. and British intelligence. If they're in China, of course, it's oppose the government there. If it's Russia, it's give Putin a hard time, and so forth. If you're in Saudi Arabia, well, Bandar is really the bad guy. If you're in Libya, it's Gaddafi that you want to be concerned about, and on and on. So it's a way of deploying these dupes and patsies, again, this network of psychotics, fanatics, misfits, mercenaries too, double agents, of course. Some of them know that they're talking to a fake figure, but you get the idea. So that has now been liquidated. Now, after hundreds of billions of dollars, they didn't do this because the idea is to get Obama reelected. Anybody who starts analyzing these events in terms of the short-term to medium-term political needs of Obama is crazy and has learned absolutely nothing. You're not dealing with presidents here who run administrations. You're dealing with a rogue network. You're dealing with an invisible government, a deep state, parallel government, secret government. This has been around since, in the current form, since about 1895 and has consolidated itself, somewhat broken up by Franklin D. Roosevelt, but back in place emphatically after the Kennedy assassination. And they don't do it for the humanitarian desire to help Obama. This is strategic desperation. The reason for this is what I've told you. It is geopolitics. It is you have an empire and you have countries that are trying to get out from under the empire. The jailbreak is on. Countries are trying to bolt from the Anglo-American empire. Right now, the main focus I think that they're most worried about is the Pakistan-Saudi Arabian alliance. That's the target. Prince Bandar, after having set up his deals with Putin in Russia in 2007, 2008, 2009, Bandar now going in March of this year to Pakistan, getting a commitment for Pakistani divisions to put down a color revolution in Saudi Arabia, if that happens, and indeed in the transitional period, to have the Pakistani nuclear umbrella, and Pakistan just tested a 350-kilometer cruise missile this past week, the Pakistani nuclear umbrella now extended to Saudi Arabia, with the hope by Bandar that they would get then Chinese missiles with Pakistani nuclear weapons so that they would have their own independent guaranteed national deterrence, so that the United States could not say to the Saudis, do what we say or we will feed you to Iran. I can remember in Germany during the Cold War, the U.S. would say to Germany, do what we say or we feed you to the Soviets. We'll sell Berlin to Russia. Well, nothing has changed, the predicates, but the method is the same. So the target is Pakistan, and the goal is to smash up this attempt to have an alliance between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And, of course, the longer-term goal is to partition Pakistan, Sindh, Punjab, Pashtunistan, Baluchistan. Main goal, no energy corridor, no development of the port of Gwadar, no pipeline from Iran into China going through Pakistan, no pipeline from the port of Gwadar also going up and into China. Now, for most people, this is peaceful economic development. It's the alternative to war from any sane point of view. Right? Economic development is how you get away from war, but not from the point of view of the crackpot U.S.-British elite. Now, the crisis between the United States and Pakistan, therefore, takes center stage. It is shocking to know that the U.S. has unleashed Predator drones once again over Pakistan on Thursday, killing a dozen people. And, of course, who were they? Well, of course, they're supposedly terrorists. The U.S. does this. They deliberately target civilians in order to goad the various ethnic groups in Pakistan, the Pashtuns in particular, into a rebellion against the Islamabad government. Because the average Pashtun, as I understand it, looks at Islamabad and said, that is run by those Punjabis and those Sinds, not by us. Baluchistan sees it more or less the same way. Look for lots and lots of Predator drone strikes in Baluchistan and in Pashtunistan to goad these people into a frenzy of rebellion, and that is the goal. So the Pakistani military should be demanding and enforcing a complete halt on all of these Predator drone strikes. We do have a tremendously rapidly escalating tension here. There are today, Friday prayers in Pakistan, lots and lots of protests. We have the Jamaat Islami out in force protesting the interference, the raids, the violation of sovereignty, and this constant policy of Predator drones. The Pakistani rhetoric has escalated, essentially because this Patsy double operation was found in the city of Abbottabad, near the military academy, of course. Well, that shows that Pakistan was complicit, doesn't it? Well, of course, the U.S. and Pakistan have been jointly running this Patsy double operation, trying to, again, use Obama to issue tapes that the U.S. wants, and also to issue these instructions to various Patsies and psychotics and fanatics around the world who might believe it, to try to maintain control of the Patsy milieu, as I describe in 9/11 synthetic terror made in USA. So the Pakistani Foreign Secretary Bashir says this is a basic miscalculation. It is a wrong hypothesis. That was a couple of days ago. More recently, Pakistan has warned of disastrous consequences if the U.S. insists on violating sovereignty with these unauthorized, uncoordinated cross-border raids. General Kayani, the head of the Pakistani military, there must be no repeat of the unauthorized raids. Otherwise, the whole military cooperation between the U.S. and Pakistan will be called into question. So you get the idea. This is now escalating towards some kind of a break, and the U.S. can heat it up anytime with more Predator drones. Back in a minute. All right, continuing with our strategic analysis here, the Pakistani warnings to the United States have been multiplying. Again, disastrous consequences. There must be no repeat of these unauthorized raids. So as the Al-Qaeda stuff builds up, remember I heard a number of CIA old boys in particular this week saying, if there are these revenge attacks coming from Al-Qaeda, we should remember that they may also be coming from the ISI, from the Inter-Services Intelligence Service of Pakistan. So that would be an excuse for them retaliating directly against Pakistan. And you also have to factor in this past week, early on in the crisis, we had a relatively clear statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry that China rejects these accusations against Pakistan as somehow being complicit with terrorism more than anybody else, I guess, and therefore China supports Pakistan. This essentially means, forget the details, dear U.S., you mess with Islamabad, you got trouble with Beijing. Do you really want to do this? Russia in the background, obviously, once these things get going, cannot remain indifferent. big question to India, where do you stand? Are you going to get yourself dragged into a thermonuclear war as a tail on the U.S. kite? Is India going to sacrifice thousands of years of civilization because the U.S. empire is crumbling? We've seen this before, right? We had the Spanish, the French, the British colonial empires coming down, the U.S. Neo-empire now clearly coming down. But great nations now have to think of how to save themselves, how to get themselves into a lifeboat in the middle of this general shipwreck. So I would urge India to pull back from the pattern of cooperating with the U.S. You become the cat's paw of the U.S. on the Eurasian continent, you're going to fare very, very badly. Now, there had been a build-up to the attack on Pakistan worth mentioning, right? Najibullah Zazi in Queens in the summer of 2009, right out there in Flushing, now in jail, right? He was from Pakistan. The Times Square bomber, January 2010, also allegedly from Pakistan. Big threats to Pakistan around that one. Mumbai, of course, blamed on Pakistan, but wasn't there that DEA agent in the middle of it that set it all up? Yes, there was, a DEA agent of the U.S. government right in the middle. We've had some harsh statements in these U.S. government terror reports, and, of course, I stress it again, WikiLeaks. Let me just spell this one out, because I mentioned this on Russia Today, and the transcript was garbled. WikiLeaks is a CIA limited hangout operation. In short, WikiLeaks is a speaking tube of the CIA, and it is used to target the CIA hit list. And Assange, as I've tried to suggest, is this zombie. He's an alumnus who apparently grew up in an atmosphere completely tinged with MK Ultra, the Ann Hamilton Byrne cult. So WikiLeaks was putting out this stuff about the internal workings of Guantanamo and so forth, and the Washington Post headline, the first page on April 25th, was New Revelations on Al-Qaeda's 9/11 Movements. First line of the story, on September 11, 2001, the core of Al-Qaeda was concentrated in a single city, Karachi, Pakistan. You get the idea. Now, we've also had this Ray Davis case, and I come back to Ray Davis because this may be the template of what to look for. The radiological dirty bomb. Ray Davis, first of all, alleged to be a diplomat, clearly not, then CIA contractor perhaps, accused by the Pakistanis of murdering 2 ISI agents, and other press sources around the world also indicated that he was essentially in contact with all kinds of terrorists himself, and some alleged that he had been part of the preparation of a radiological dirty bomb. So that would, of course, be the key one, because that would allow the U.S. to argue, aha, the Pakistani nuclear forces are not under control. So this is now the buildup, and I'll get to some questions of drills in a minute. We're told that there's a cache of documents, the files, the disk drives, the thumb drives, the hard drives of the bin Laden office there. And of course, what can this be used for? Well, yeah, the simple thing is, you're an intelligence agency. You go into those hard drives and you make sure that you find things, you manufacture things that target who you want to target. Maybe you can target China. Maybe you can target Russia. Maybe you can target Iran. You can certainly do something to target Bandar, can't you? You can certainly target Gaddafi. So you get the idea. This is now carte blanche, right? Anything you want to pull out of the hat can be attributed to the bin Laden files. So the CIA essentially becomes its own WikiLeaks, right? The CIA becomes WikiLeaks vis-a-vis bin Laden. There's also an attempt by the Wall Street Journal, I think, to found their own WikiLeaks this week. So all of this going on, and watch out for these drone strikes. As I said, Thursday there was a drone strike in Pakistan. There's also in Yemen a drone strike, the first one since 2002, we're told. If you believe it, I don't know. Also, watch out for Obama. He loves adulation. He is a narcissist. He is a megalomaniac. These events are not tailored to his needs, but if you happen to be president and you do get this idea that you're greedy for adulation and that military action is the way to get it, you can go into a manic flight forward, especially because his economic performance, of course, is so wretched, as we've been seeing again and again this week. Now, concerning Libya, let's not forget Libya. This may be an even more an immediate area of military clash. The NATO commander has announced that the bombing of Libya has reached an impasse. They just can't seem to destroy Gaddafi's forces, and therefore circles in NATO are calling for a new United Nations resolution allowing for the ground invasion of Libya. Now, at this point, dear Russia, dear China, dear others, you must vote against this now. You must veto this, or you will have ceased to exist. And forces inside these countries that don't see that, I'm afraid, are not representing the interests of those countries. We're also told that the rebels in Libya, this gang with plenty of al-Qaeda representatives around the table, we've got Yunus, we've got Jalil, we've got Hifter, and they're going to be broke. I wonder how much of that money has already gone to Switzerland. So they want a piece of the $33 billion of assets that the U.S. has. They want some of that oil money. Apparently Qatar, or Qatar, as it's possibly called, have helped the rebels to sell, I think, 200 million or so of oil. This is, of course, stealing. If Hillary Clinton dares to begin giving the $33 billion of Libyan money to these rebels, this is going to cause some real problems, right? As we see in Shakespeare, fie upon your law. If that's your idea of private property contracts and ownership of money, then I don't know who in his right mind would ever put money in the U.S. anymore. Better go back to Switzerland at that point, or someplace else. So, Saif Gaddafi and the three children, one child of 3 years, one child of 2 years, one child of 3 or 4 months. And these are grandchildren of other children of Gaddafi. And then this revolting, monstrous spectacle of the Dance of Death in Benghazi on Saturday night, which then, of course, became a similarly macabre spectacle here in Washington and in New York. I want to condemn the policy of assassinations carried out by NATO. I would like to also point out what Putin had said about bombing infrastructure. That is, of course, genocide. If you destroy the great man-made river, that is mass murder. That's a Nuremberg crime. These precedents are still there, and maybe someday they'll be validated. So watch out for false flag attacks blamed on Libya. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're just wrapping up on Libya, this Rome conference. This is essentially a conference of terrorist supporters. This tremendous contradiction. In Pakistan and Afghanistan, the U.S. says the main goal, the overriding goal, is to attack and kill everybody who's from al-Qaeda. But in Yemen and in Libya, and one suspects in Algeria and Syria and elsewhere, the al-Qaeda people are embraced, of course. They've now become pro-democracy forces. They're going to get money. They're going to get oil income. They're getting diplomatic support. They're getting modern weapons. They're getting advisors. They're being organized into colonial regiments under at least British, French, and Italian officers, and maybe U.S. officers, too. The special forces have been there by now since the 23rd of February, and the whole thing was planned. It's South Mistral, so you get the idea on that. We also have this mythological idea coming from the left liberals that now that Obama has liquidated bin Laden, it's time to have a withdrawal from Afghanistan. Well, something of this sort is certainly possible, but what would it be? It is not to make peace, but it is rather to do what the U.S. has been trying to do for quite a while, which is to essentially end the conflict between the U.S. and the Pashtuns, the Taliban, and play the Pashtuns against Pakistan. That was the hope all along. The whole policy of the West Point speech, December 2009, is export the civil war out of Afghanistan and into Pakistan, and do that by using the Pashtun group and also the Baluchi group against the other two ethnic groups inside Pakistan. And it's worth mentioning, going back to February, Mrs. Clinton over there at the State Department carried out a big shift in the U.S. attitude towards the Taliban. It used to be that the United States was demanding preconditions from the Taliban to sit down and negotiate. The Taliban was required to renounce violence, to break with al-Qaeda, and to embrace the Afghan constitution. All of those were preconditions of even talking to the U.S., but now in February, Mrs. Clinton said, we're dumping all that. We are willing to talk to the Taliban with no preconditions. Dear Mullah Omar, I want to see you soon. So you get the idea. But of course, even this would not be peace, because the CIA plan that we discussed at the time, during 2009, when there was this long debate about what to do with McChrystal getting into the act and so forth, the CIA plan, which was, I believe, the Biden plan, was do it all with Predator drones over Afghanistan in large numbers, and special forces teams. And now that we have the so-called success, this staged theater circus of Abbottabad, we now have increasing calls to say, well, the special forces are what you need. Look, all those 100,000 troops in Afghanistan couldn't do it. All you needed was a real good, Navy SEAL team and all of this. So watch for the U.S. to attempt to indeed make a deal with the Taliban, with the idea that the Pashtuns, that larger ethnic group, will then be played against the government in Islamabad. And then the CIA plan would be implemented inside Afghanistan. Since we are looking at the Arab world here, in Yemen, as of today, President Saleh is still hanging tough. He's still holding on. He's defiant. He now says he's not going anywhere. He had been pressurized by the Gulf Cooperation Council. Syria continues to show us the example of how you can defend against destabilizations if the ruling elite is compact and united. The demonstrations today, yet another Friday, right? Big chance for tumult. But no, I think this, as far as I can see, even with the best efforts of Al Jazeera to make this look imposing, it doesn't look very imposing. And the way they're doing it in Syria is preventive troop deployment. In other words, you put tanks in the streets and keep them there way before the Friday so that it becomes much harder for people to come out. Al Jazeera is pushing, along with other imperialist media, the line that Syrians are no longer afraid. They're no longer afraid. They're coming out. They have contempt for death. They don't care. Except that, of course, in Damascus, no demonstrations of any note in a heavily centralized country. So the big Syrian Friday falls flat. And that would seem to be the Syrian story. The European Union, this bunch of gaggling poultry, have now said that they want this asset freeze against Syria and a visa ban. Well, I'm sure Assad and his generals are quaking in their boots. The interesting thing also is the Al Jazeera analysis is that it's the generals and the secret police guys who are the hawks. They want to crack down. Assad is really a reformer, different than Egypt, where Mubarak wanted to defend the state and then was dragged down by Tantawi and Annan and the rest of these characters. Now, we've also got the deal between Fatah and Hamas, and I suppose that's a good thing as far as it goes, right? Both of these groups are on the defensive. There are ferments being fomented against them as well, and Netanyahu insists on saying that this is a step away from peace. Well, no, it's crazy. You've got to have one interlocutor. The Turks and the Egyptians, notably, pressing Netanyahu to be reasonable. Not likely. And where this goes, this is anybody's guess. In terms of other places to be aware of, right? Russia remains in the grip of this rivalry between Medvedev and Putin, which means that the ability of Russia to act in the world is somewhat in question. In China, we have the succession to the new president, Xi, X-I. Hard to tell from here what's going on with that. And now, disturbingly, in Iran, a faction fight between Ahmadinejad and Khamenei, with Khamenei today ordering the arrest of a number of allies of Ahmadinejad, accusing them of sorcery and having traffic with spirits, with the so-called jinns of pre-Muslim pagan times in these countries. We have to assume that splits, wherever these splits occur, these are fomented by our dear friends in London and in Washington, and these things happening at the present time make them very, very suspect. Now, just in terms of Assange that we mentioned before, Assange this week gave an interview, I believe, to Russia Today, and he made earth-shaking revelations. Assange told us what shocked us, and nobody would have believed it, that Facebook is a mechanism for spying on people. Wow, we're blown away. Who would have thought it? Who ever would have believed it? Well, pardon the irony. I hope you realize that was irony. Assange, of course, being an artist in the CIA genre of limited hangout, wants you to think that his tired, superficial, idiotic scandals are somehow the great earth-shaking thing. Remember, he doesn't like 9/11 truth, doesn't want to hear anything about the big covert operations of the age. He is part today of one of the covert operations of the age, the so-called Arab Spring, which I would call the putsch wave, the wave of putches across the Arab world. And the stuff that he tells you is stuff that you already knew. You can find clips of me on Tarpley.net. Go back to about a year ago, and you'll find me telling that Facebook, of course, is a tool of the U.S. intelligence community, offensively, as in Iran, and in a sense of intelligence gathering, that too. So this is now the situation. Now, in the background, as in the case of 1914, we have an economic crisis going on. The dollar is now at a 3-year low compared to most currencies. And here in the Washington Post of Wednesday, May 4th, we have an article about the dollar at risk. The currency's slow decline could become a precipitous fall. One of the biggest dangers now is that the dollar could decline in ways that are abrupt and disruptive. So it's a warning that the collapse of the dollar could occur now just about any time. Bear that in mind. This is what's propelling the U.S. British elites into fight-forward adventurism, and we'll be back in a minute.